I am Sensei Tony, and welcome to the House of Meditation. We'll now begin the meditation service. Namo Buddhadharma, Namo Buddhadharma, Namo Buddhadharma, Namo Buddhadharma.
Let us celebrate the liturgy of the day. Let us share the peace. May all beings awaken to that peace which is our true home. Let us take refuge. I take refuge in the ground of being, within which I live and move and breathe. Let us make the accord. I take sanctuary in the heart of being, accepting all of my delusions in thought, word, or deed, born of ignorance, hatred, and greed. Let us give thanks. I give thanks for all things, awakening to the interbeing of all nature. May my heart be open and my mind clear. May all be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and may all come to know that peace which is born of insight and understanding. Since it is the practice of enlightenment, that practice has no beginning, and since it is enlightenment within the practice, that realization has no end. So tonight is a special celebration that we do each year, and that is where we celebrate the lives of our animal companions. And we call it the blessing of the beasts. And this is something that for me is very special, as it is for, I know, for many of our members and for most people out there, who realize that our animal companions are very, very important to us, and that they give us so much. And so it's so important to be grateful and give thanks for them. So that's what we're doing today. The reading for tonight comes from a very ancient Buddhist text, which is called The Gateless Gate. And The Gateless Gate is a collection of Buddhist stories that are designed to help one better understand the teachings of oneness. And so one of the most famous ones is called Joshu's dog. And according to the story, one day Sensei Joshu and his student were taking a walk in the woods when the student asked, "Sensei, does a dog have Buddha nature?" Sensei Joshu simply replied, "Moo." So anybody who's been looking at Buddhism at all, particularly the Zen tradition, has heard of that particular story. In some versions, there was a dog barking off in the distance, which is what prompted the student to ask the question. But the answer that he gives, which is the word mu, which is Japanese. In Chinese, it's wu, wu, has many different meanings. And this particular story has probably more interpretations than probably almost any other piece of literature in the Buddhist lexicon. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can interpret this. Now, looking at it on its face, the answer that Joshu gives the student is no. So when the student hears the dog barking off in the distance, he turns to Joshu and says, does a dog have Buddha nature? Now, the context for him asking this question would have been all of the sutras and all of the teachings and doctrines that would have affirmed this concept of Buddha nature, and that all beings have it. And this student was probably just clarifying, is this something that's for everyone, or is it just for humans? And so the enigmatic answer, mu, or no, needs explanation. the main meaning of all the teachings of the Buddha are to help us, the main meaning is to help us to overcome this sense of separation, the sense that we don't belong. In other words, if you think that you can summarize everything by saying, what is a Buddha? A Buddha is a being who awakens to the oneness of all life. Then oneness, or the teachings of the interconnectedness of all life, becomes the foundation. But the problem is that our language and the way we communicate always involves usually a binary. So when we're thinking of oneness, and then we have to deal with the diversity of the way language works, and whether that would be something mathematical or musical or just plain old verbal oral intercourse, it's always involving sounds that represent images, which represent concepts. And so there's no way to escape that. But what we want to do is not pretend that there aren't a myriad of diversities, but we want to try to talk or speak in such a way as that we always remember that each of those individual things represents the whole. So even though we might talk about an individual thing, we know that that individual thing represents the whole. And it's very important. And so when Joshu's student asked this question, it's a very important question, actually, because how we use our language, how we use words, is so powerful. Something that I say very often, that my father used to say, was that words are the fingers that shape the mind. And so if you're using words, but you haven't really sharply defined them, and you don't really have a ready, easy definition, then neither does your mind. And so it will begin to look for things to try to fill up that gap. And sometimes that won't be very effective. So that's why it's very important for us to understand the words that we use, why we use them, and study the deeper meaning of them. Because whether we're aware of it or not, those words are shaping the way we think. So when we look at this conversation between Joshu and his students, it's very, very important. One of the distinguishments we make in the four-direction system of mindfulness is concerning one of our mindfulness models, which is the true self and ego self model. And in that, we help folks to distinguish between the true self, which is a way of talking about our being, and the ego self, which is a way of talking about doing and having, or not doing and not having. And so it's very critical for us to understand that when we are going about our lives, that when we do something, maybe we make a mistake, or maybe, we mess up in some fashion, it's important for us to understand that's not making a statement about our being. It's only making a statement about our doing and having. And when we're clear about that, when we've learned through practice to reorient ourselves from the true self perspective, where we learn to accept and embrace the ego, then we can learn. It's very hard for us to learn anything whenever the ego self is the center, where we're trying to define our being through the world of doing and having. As long as we're doing that, it's going to be very hard for us to really learn, because our whole sense of self-worth, our whole sense of self-estimation feels like it's under attack when we get criticized. And if we're clear, it doesn't mean And it allows us to look at ourselves honestly and say, you know, maybe I could do this better. Maybe that was a mistake. And it's okay, because it doesn't mean that my whole being now has been somehow demoted. You can't touch that part. That is an inherent gift. And that is an inherent grace that we live out of once we awaken to this reality. And this perspective allows us to look at the ego self with compassion and understanding, and also discipline. And so that's why that shift is so important. So the question that the student is asking Joshua is a lot more meaningful than some, philosophical doctrine. It's really about practice and the way we understand practice. So what he's saying is, does a dog have Buddha nature? Well, he's saying have, right? So immediately he's putting it in the doing and having side. So he's confusing Buddha nature with doing and having. And that's why Joshua says no. Because he's confusing being with doing and having. Buddha nature is another term for the ground of being. Having refers to the ego self realm. So, a way that could have been clearer for the student would have been to just affirm that a dog does not have Buddha nature, but rather that a dog is Buddha nature. And I know it sounds like semantics, but it's the difference between the universe and everything else. It seems hair thin, and yet it changes entire worlds. And that's what was trying to be conveyed by Joshua's no. He's saying, no, we don't have Buddha nature. It's not a possession. It's not something that we earn through practice. It's not something that we lose through not practicing. It's an understanding. In Japanese, they call it shinjin. It means true and trusting. That once we understand this, and even if we don't at the beginning really believe it, but we just try it out pragmatically, we begin to see the virtue of it. And in time, most of us realize that it's not just a nice idea, that it represents the deepest nature of reality itself. So, the person who asked the question, the Dear Sensei question, was very specific to me, which was, Dear Sensei, does your beloved cat, Sir Basil, have Buddha nature? My answer is no. He is Buddha nature. He is a part of the very great cosmic chain of being. He is Buddha nature. He doesn't have it. He is it. So when we honor our animal companions tonight, I really want you to think about that. That it's not that we look at them and ask, do they have Buddha nature? Do they not have it? It's more the clarity that they are Buddha nature. That it's inherent. And as I said, perhaps their sentiency is not quite the same as ours, but they are part of this oneness. And there's nothing that separates us from that oneness. Occasionally I'll get someone who will ask me, when they lose a beloved pet, when a beloved pet dies, they'll ask me, well, Sensei, will I ever see this creature again? Will I ever know this? And I tell them that nothing in oneness is lost. So I can't specifically say how that might manifest. I can assure them that in oneness there is no separation. None whatsoever.
Speaking of Sir Basil, there he is. Get ready for his blessing. The moment we receive true and trusting, solid and clear like a diamond, infinite light and life embrace and protect us, liberating us completely. We will now do the blessing of the beasts. So I would suggest to everyone at home, take your animal if possible, or be beside them, go to your altar space and bow together. One of the little things I do with Basil each night is I bow to my centering space and he bows with me. And he has been doing this since we brought him 4 weeks. So now at night, he will come out when it's time for me to bow and go to bed. And it's so sweet because he's waiting. All right. So place your hand upon your animal and I will extend my blessing to you. We give thanks in the name of holy oneness for the animals who live with us. Let us be ever grateful for the companionship they provide and help us to be faithful in caring for them. We pray today for animals who are mistreated and that their pain will come to an end. We remember with love our companion animals who have died. We remember at this time also those animals who are lost or separated from their owners. We offer a special blessing on every creature gathered here today, the large and the small. May they live peacefully. Bless us all to love all of creation and revere its sacredness. We ask this blessing in the name of holy oneness, within whom all creatures belong. I bless you in the name of the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. Thank you. That completes the blessing. Let us recite together the 4 immeasurable vows. Sentient beings are numberless. I vow to liberate them. Delusions are endless. I vow to end them. The ways of compassion and wisdom are boundless. I vow to embody them. The way is unattainable. I vow to attain it. Let us recite together the precepts for the community of the vow. I allow my true self to manifest in all aspects of life. I take complete responsibility for my own life and all of my actions. I affirm my personal being and acknowledge it as a path to awakening and freedom. I embrace all aspects of my personal being, including my shadow, so that they may be transformed. I affirm an attitude of openness to my true self, even in the midst of suffering. We will now offer incense, and we will chant the Jizo chant, and Jizo is the Bodhisattva that is associated with the care and love of animals. And after we have done that, we will sit quietly and abide. So let us begin with the chanting, and you can offer incense at your home altars as well. We begin with the clergy and then the laity. starting with senior to junior. Namo Jesus. knowing that we never practice alone or just for ourselves. Let us recite together the Bodhisattva. We dedicate this practice to the welfare of all beings throughout space and time. May it ever be so. Namo. That concludes tonight's special service and the celebration of our animal companions. Thank you for joining us, and as always, check out our website at senseitony.com for all the different programs that we offer, including private, personal, virtual mindfulness counseling and direction, and also our teacher training program.